Snow fell in Ravensford the way forgotten prayers fall, soft, persistent, and unheard by most. The old Eldridge Park lay at the city's heart like a wound that had never quite closed. Once it had been the jewel of the kingdom, where queens in silver gowns danced beneath lanterns of fey fire. Now the iron gates sagged, the marble statues wept black lichen, and the only music came from wind threading through skeletal oaks. On a bench older than the Republic itself sat Valerian Vesper, sovereign of the Crimson Court, king of all vampires west of the Iron Sea. 643 winters had passed since he last felt warmth in his chest. His hair, white as moonlight on bone, spilled over a coat of midnight velvet stitched with constellations that no longer existed. Crimson eyes stared at nothing. A single frost-bitten black rose rested beside him. Last gift from a queen who had chosen sunrise over immortality 3 centuries ago. The petals curled inward like dying fingers. People hurried past the park's edge, collars turned up, packages clutched tight with holiday ribbons. None looked toward the bench. Instinct older than language warned them away, until a child's laugh broke the silence like crystal. Valerian lifted his gaze. A woman in a dove-gray wool coat walked the snow-dusted path, auburn hair escaping its braid in rebellious curls. Beside her skipped a little girl in scarlet, cheeks round and red as winter apples, a ridiculous pom-pom bow bouncing above one ear. The child clutched a grease-stained paper sack the way knights once clutched holy relics. They paused at another bench where an old soldier slept beneath newspapers. The woman knelt, murmuring, and placed 2 still warm meat pies into trembling hands. The soldier woke enough to whisper blessing. The child beamed as though she had handed him a kingdom. Then the girl's gaze found Valerian. "Mama," she said, voice carrying on frost, "that man is lonely as the moon." The mother, Elara Whitlock, followed her daughter's pointing mitten. Her breath clouded. Something ancient and sorrowful looked back at her from the shadows. Yet the child tugged free and marched straight to the Vampire King. She stopped an arm's length away, boots crunching. Snowflakes caught in her lashes. "Don't be sad, mister," she announced, solemn as a priestess. "You can borrow my mama for a little while. She gives the best hugs and makes cinnamon stars that fix everything." 6 centuries of iron control shattered. Valerian opened his mouth. No sound emerged. The strongest creature in the realm was undone by a 6-year-old offering to lend him her mother. Elara hurried forward, cheeks flushed. "Lily, sweetheart, we don't," she stopped. Up close, the stranger's grief was a tangible weight. Instead of pulling her daughter away, she drew one last pie from the sack and held it out. "Solstice is in 12 days, she said quietly. "Even kings get cold." Valerian stared at the offering as though it might burn him. Slowly, he removed one black leather glove. His fingers, pale, elegant, lethal, closed around the warm pastry. For an instant their skin touched. A pulse of heat shot through him, the first since 1382. "Thank you," he rasped, a voice unused to gratitude. Lily waved both mittens. "Eat the whole thing. Mama says sugar is medicine for broken hearts." They turned to leave. Valerian rose in one fluid motion, rose abandoned on the bench. "Wait!" The word cracked like ice. "Is there somewhere warm nearby? Cocoa, perhaps. I would repay the kindness." Elara hesitated. Every story ever told screamed danger. Yet the sorrow in those crimson eyes was deeper than any ocean. Lily answered for her. "The Lantern Cafe has marshmallow mountains." And so the vampire sovereign followed a widow and her child through falling snow, the scent of cinnamon and hope trailing behind them like a comet's tail. The Lantern Cafe was all honey-colored wood and mismatched china, windows fogged with steam and laughter. Valerian ducked beneath the low beam, built for mortals, and felt every eye turn then slide away, unable to hold his gaze. They claimed the corner booth beneath a stained-glass lamp that painted Lily's hair ruby and gold. Elara ordered 3 hot chocolates, with the mountain, please. Valerian had not tasted food since the Renaissance, but when the mug arrived piled with whipped cream he lifted it carefully, as though it were fragile as prophecy. Lily dominated conversation. School pageants, a lost tooth, the snow dragon she intended to build tomorrow. Elara listened with the soft smile of a woman who had learned to find joy in small things since burying her husband. Eventually Lily yawned, crawled into her mother's lap, and fell asleep mid-sentence, trusting as only children can. In the sudden quiet Elara studied Valerian. "You haven't told us your name." "Valerian Vesper." He gave the true one, Lies tasted wrong in this warm light. That's a king's name. It once was. Silence stretched, comfortable yet charged. Outside, snow thickened. My husband was killed 2 winters ago, Alara said suddenly. They said it was a wild animal, but the wounds... She traced a scar on her wrist hidden beneath her sleeve. Some nights I swear I still smell pine and musk on the wind. Werewolf, the old ones whisper. Valerian's fingers tightened around the mug. The ancient war between vampire and Lycan had never truly ended. It only slept. I am sorry. Are you? Her gaze sharpened. Because your eyes look like the stories grandmother told. Eyes that have watched empires fall. He could have compelled her to forget. Instead he told truth. I am the monster in those stories. Yet tonight your daughter offered me her mother, and I find I do not wish to be that monster anymore. Alara did not flinch. Then don't be. Lily stirred, mumbling about marshmallow dragons. Valerian reached out, hesitant, and tucked a curl behind the child's ear. The gesture felt sacred. When they left, he paid with antique gold coins the barista accepted wide-eyed. On the threshold he paused. May I see you again? Alara studied him for a long moment, then wrote her address on a napkin in neat, defiant script. Tomorrow, she said. Lily wants to build that snow dragon. Kings are good at castles, aren't they? Valerian bowed, an old court gesture. I shall bring towers. As they vanished into the snow, he stood beneath the cafe's lantern, warmth lingering in his dead veins for the first time in 6 centuries. The next evenings blurred into wonder. Valerian arrived at dusk with armloads of rare hothouse roses for Alara and a wooden sword carved with protective runes for Lily. They built not one snow dragon, but an entire fortress in the park, complete with icicle battlements. Children gathered. Valerian taught them courtly bows and how to pack snowballs that flew true. For hours he forgot he was a king. But the city whispered. In shadowed taverns werewolves gathered, amber eyes gleaming. Their new alpha, Torin Grimfong, had risen by ripping out his predecessor's throat beneath the last blood moon. He preached that the vampire sovereign grew soft, consorting with humans, that the ancient treaties were chains to be broken. One night Valerian escorted Alara and Lily home through lamplit streets. Halfway there, 3 wolves in human guise stepped from an alley, scent of pine and musk thick. Message from Grimfong, the largest growled. Stay away from the woman and the whelp, leech. Or we take what's ours. Valerian moved faster than sight, slamming the speaker against brick, fangs descending. Touch them and I will salt the earth with your ashes. He let them flee, but the threat lingered like frostbite. That night in Alara's small kitchen, while Lily slept, he told her everything, who he was, the endless war, the coming storm. She listened without fear. When he finished, she took his cold hand between her warm ones. Then we fight for tomorrow together. Outside, crimson snow began to fall, first sign of the blood moon cycle beginning. The forest beyond Ravensford was older than the city, older than the vampire court, older than memory itself. Pines rose like cathedral pillars, their needles muffling every footstep until the world felt wrapped in velvet silence. Snow sifted through the branches in slow silver curtains, catching on Valerian's white hair like stars snagged in moonlight. Alara walked beside him, Lily asleep in his arms, wrapped in his greatcoat. The child's breath warmed the hollow of his throat. The sensation was so foreign he nearly stumbled. Behind them, 2 of Valerian's most trusted guards, silent shadows in silver-trimmed black, kept watch for Lycan scouts. They reached Glassmere at the stroke of the witching hour. The coven's circle of standing stones glowed faintly blue, frost spiraling up the runes carved millennia ago. Morwen waited at the center, ancient yet ageless, her hair a river of midnight threaded with constellations that moved when no one looked directly. She did not bow to the vampire sovereign. Instead she studied Lily's sleeping face with eyes the color of winter storms. So the prophecy walks, she murmured. I wondered which century it would choose. Valerian's arms tightened protectively. Speak plainly, Morwenna of Glassmere. The witch gestured, and the snow within the circle melted instantly, revealing black earth that steamed. She scattered dried rowan berries and raven bones, then drew a blade across her own palm. Blood hissed where it touched the ground, forming letters in a language that hurt to read. Alara Whitlock, Morwen began, voice layered as though many spoke through her. Your husband was not merely bitten. He was born of the Grimfong line, 7th son of a 7th son, hidden among humans to escape the pack wars. His seed carried the curse dormant. This child, she nodded at Lily, is the bridge. On the night of the triple blood moon, her 9th birthday, she will awaken fully. She may choose the moon and become Lycan. She may choose the night and become Nosferatu, or she may choose the dawn and become something new. Whatever she chooses, the ancient enmity ends or burns the world. Alara's knees buckled. Valerian caught her before she fell, shifting Lily so he held them both. The guards growled low, sensing their king's rising fury. "How long?" he demanded. 18 months, 11 days, Morwen replied. Torin Grimfong already smells the power in her blood. He will come long before then to claim her, or kill her if she will not bend. Valerian's eyes bled to full crimson. Then he will learn what it costs to threaten my family. Morwen produced a small crystal vial filled with starlight. Drink this under the next new moon. It will hide her scent for a time, but it is only delay, not salvation. Alara took the vial with shaking fingers. There must be another way. There is always another way, Morwen said softly. But the price is usually love. They left the circle heavier than they had entered. Snow had begun to fall again, thick and deliberate, as though the forest itself tried to bury the prophecy. On the ride home in Valerian's black carriage, Alara stared out the window while Lily slept on. Finally she spoke, voice raw. "I always knew she was special. When she was 3 she healed a bird with a broken wing, just by crying over it. I told myself it was imagination." She turned to Valerian. "What kind of mother brings a child into a war older than nations?" "The kind who teaches her daughter that kindness is stronger than claws," Valerian answered. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "And the kind who refuses to face that war alone." Outside, wolves howled in the distance, too many voices, too coordinated. Valerian's grip tightened until Alara's bones creaked. "They have found us already," he said quietly. The carriage lurched as the horses bolted in sudden terror. Through the window, amber eyes ringed them in the darkness. Valerian kissed Lily's forehead, then Alara's lips, hard, desperate. "Hold her. Whatever happens, hold her." He flung open the door and stepped into the night, coat billowing like raven wings. Snow exploded outward as he shifted into shadow and steel. The last thing Alara saw before the guards slammed the door was Valerian standing alone against a tide of wolves, crimson eyes blazing like twin setting suns. The fortress of Raven's Crag had never fallen. Not to crusaders, not to witch hunts, not to the Great Leaken Uprising of 1741. Tonight it bled. Torin Grimfong led the assault himself, a mountain tall in hybrid form, black fur silvered with frost, scars glowing like molten gold across his chest. 500 lichens followed, some in man-shape with silver blades, others fully wolf, slavering and fearless. Valerian met them on the outer slope, sword of star-forged iron in one hand, the other crackling with blood flame. His guard formed a crescent behind him, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Inside the keep, Alara stood on the highest balcony, Lily clutched to her chest. The child was awake now, thumb in mouth, eyes huge. Below, torches arced through the night as lichens tried to scale the walls with grappling claws. "Will Papa Val win?" Lily whispered. Alara swallowed terror. "He always wins. But tonight he needs our help too." She carried Lily to the armory, strapped on leather armor dyed midnight blue, Valerian's colors, and took up the silver bow Morwen had gifted her. Together they climbed to the eastern tower where the coven had laid wards. The battle raged for hours. Valerian moved like a storm of blades, carving through wolves, but for every one that fell 2 more leapt over the wall. Blood steamed on snow, turning the slope to crimson slush. Torin reached the inner gate and roared challenge. Valerian answered, meeting him in the courtyard beneath the shattered portcullis. Steel rang. Sparks flew. Torin's claws raked Valerian's side, opening flesh to the bone. Valerian's sword took Torin's ear and half away. They circled, breathing hard. "She is Pack," Torin snarled, voice guttural. "You steal what is ours." "She is a child," Valerian spat blood. "And she is mine." Torin lunged. Valerian parried, but the alpha was faster, stronger under the moon's madness. Claws closed around Valerian's throat, lifting him from the ground. On the tower, Alara knocked an arrow tipped with rowan and starlight. Her hands did not shake. She whispered the old words Morwen had taught her, words that tasted of iron and grief. The arrow flew true, punching through Torin's shoulder joint. The alpha howled, grip loosening. Valerian twisted free, drove his sword upward beneath the ribs. Torin staggered back, eyes wide with shock. But the wound was not fatal. Torin laughed, wet and terrible, and called retreat. The lichens melted into the forest, leaving their dead. Valerian fell to his knees in the snow, blood pouring black in the moonlight. Alara ran to him, Lily on her hip. She pressed her wrist to his lips without hesitation. "Drink," she commanded, tears falling onto his face like warm rain. I will not bury another love. The first swallow was agony and salvation. The second tasted of home. By the third, his wounds began to close and something deeper knit, heart to heart, blood to blood. When dawn finally bled across the sky, the survivors counted 200 lichened corpses and 37 vampires lost forever. Valerian stood on the battlements with Alara's hand in his, watching the sun rise without burning for the first time in 6 centuries. Her blood had gifted him that miracle too. Torin had escaped. The war was far from over. Spring pretended to come, but the mountains kept their snow. Inside Raven's Crag, life found a rhythm. Displaced vampires and human families filled the guest wings. Alara turned the great hall into a school. Lily's laughter echoed from rafters that had known only silence. Valerian walked in daylight now, a thin band of silver and ruby on his finger. Alara's blood and Lily's tears forged into a daylight ring by Morwen's craft. He still flinched at direct sun, but the pain was bearable when Lily dragged him outside to make flower crowns. On the night of the first blood moon, they stood on the highest balcony. The sky burned rust and scarlet, beautiful and terrible. Valerian dropped to one knee in the snow at Alara's feet. In his palm lay a ring of black gold threaded with a single strand of her hair and a drop of his own ancient blood, sealed in crystal. "Marry me," he said, voice rough. "Not as king to subject, not as monster to mortal. Just Valerian to Alara. Let me love you in the open, under whatever moons rise." Alara's answer was a kiss that tasted of salt and cinnamon. Lily, watching from the doorway, clapped mittened hands and declared they were married now official. They spoke vows older than Christianity beneath that cursed moon, witnessed by coven witches, vampire lords, and one reformed Lecan scout who had defected after the siege. Rings were exchanged. Blood was shared, hers willingly given, his reverently taken. The bond snapped into place like the closing of a book the world had waited centuries to finish. In the days that followed, scouts brought dark news. Torin had allied with rogue vampire houses who resented Valerian's new human weakness. A greater army gathered in the north. Valerian trained Alara personally, sword bow poisons politics. She was a swift study, her anger honed sharp as any blade. At night they loved with the desperation of soldiers who know tomorrow is promised to no one. One evening Lily found them in the library. "When I grow up," she announced, "I want to be brave like Mama and strong like Papa Val, but mostly I want everyone to stop fighting." Valerian lifted her onto his lap. "Then we will give you a world where you never have to choose." The second blood moon rose the color of a fresh bruise. Raven's Crag had never felt so alive and so fragile at once. The great halls rang with children's laughter, with the clatter of human cooks teaching vampire courtiers how to make cinnamon bread, with Lecan defectors learning court etiquette from ancient retainers who still couldn't quite believe the war might end. Valerian walked those corridors barefoot, shirt unlaced, hair loose, a man instead of a myth for the first time in 6 centuries. He carried Lily on his shoulders while Alara walked beside them, her hand resting on the small of his back as though afraid he might vanish if she let go. They had begun to believe in tomorrow. That was the night Cassius struck. Cassius Aurelian had been Valerian's shadow since they were mortal boys running barefoot through olive groves that no longer existed. He had held the cup the night Valerian drank the blood that made him immortal. He had placed the obsidian crown on Valerian's brow when the old king fell. For 643 years Cassius had been brother, confidant, the only creature Valerian trusted with his life. He sold them all for a promise of power. The betrayal began quietly. At dusk, Cassius requested a private audience in the solar overlooking the valley. Valerian went alone, still flushed from an afternoon spent teaching Lily how to waltz on the terrace. He found Cassius standing at the window, silhouetted against the rising moon, hands clasped behind his back. "I have come to beg you to reconsider," Cassius said without turning. Valerian poured 2 goblets of warmed blood, laced with winter spice. "Reconsider what, old friend?" "This domestication." Cassius's voice was silk over steel. "A human queen, a half-breed heir, abdicating the throne to a council. You unking yourself. You shame everything we built." Valerian offered a goblet. Cassius did not take it. "I am not unking myself," Valerian replied quietly. "I am finally becoming the man I was supposed to be before the world taught me cruelty was strength." Cassius turned then. His eyes, once warm amber, were cold as winter graves. "The world has not changed, Valerian. Only you have grown weak." The word struck like a physical blow. Valerian set both goblets down untouched. Weakness is believing love diminishes power. I have never been stronger. Cassius smiled, thin and sharp. We shall see. Alarms shattered the night an hour later. Silver-tipped arrows rained through arrow slits that should have been sealed by blood wards. Leakin shock troops poured through the eastern sally port, an entrance only the highest nobles knew existed. Valerian woke to the smell of burning yew and the screams of dying guards. He was out of bed and armed before his feet touched the stone floor. Alara was already pulling on leather armor, eyes fierce. Lily stood in the doorway clutching her wooden sword, face pale but determined. Take her to the sanctuary vault. Valerian ordered the 2 guards who burst in. Seal it with my blood if you must. Nothing gets through. Alara caught his wrist. I fight beside you. You fight for her, he countered, pressing a hard kiss to her mouth. Keep our daughter breathing. That is the only victory I need tonight. She kissed him once more, fierce and salty with tears, then ran. Valerian moved through his own fortress like a storm of blades. Corridors that had known centuries of peace ran red. He found his captain of the guard impaled on silver pikes, still trying to crawl toward the nursery. Valerian ended the Leakin responsible with a single stroke, then closed the captain's eyes with blood-slick fingers. He reached the throne room as Cassius ascended the dais, the obsidian crown already in his hands. Stop, Valerian commanded, voice carrying the full weight of sovereignty. Cassius paused, crown raised. Around them, Leakin warriors formed a half-circle, arrows nocked. Cassius's personal guard, vampires Valerian had knighted himself, stood at his back. It is done, Cassius said almost gently. The council is dead. Half the court bends the knee to the new order. Tauren offers me co-rule if I deliver the child. You may keep the woman if you swear fealty. Valerian's sword ignited with crimson flame. Over the ashes of my heart. They fought. It was the most beautiful and terrible duel in vampire history. 2 masters who knew every feint, every weakness, hope of the other. Steel screamed. Blood hissed on marble. Cassius fought with elegant cruelty. Valerian fought with centuries of grief made incandescent. They broke apart, breathing hard. Cassius's cheek was laid open to bone. Valerian bled from a dozen wounds that refused to close, silver poisoning burning through immortal veins. You could have ruled forever, Cassius panted. Instead you choose mortality in installments. Valerian smiled, slow and terrible. I choose eternity with them. Cassius lunged again, and this time Valerian let the blade come. He caught Cassius's wrist, twisted, drove his old friend to his knees. The obsidian crown clattered across the floor. For a heartbeat Valerian hesitated. 600 years of brotherhood flashed behind his eyes, laughter under foreign stars, shared grief when they lost their humanity, promises made in blood. Cassius saw the hesitation and laughed bitter. Still weak. He never saw Alara. She stepped from the shadows behind the throne, silver dagger in both hands, face carved from winter stone. This is for every child who will never have to choose between moon and night, she whispered, and buried the blade in Cassius's heart. The ancient vampire looked down at her in stunned betrayal, then at Valerian. Something almost like peace passed over his features. I was tired too, he rasped, and crumbled into ash that scattered like black snow. The lichens wavered. Valerian lifted his sword, flame roaring higher. Leave this place, he told them, voice ringing with command older than language. Or join your false king in dust. They fled. Later, when the fires were quenched and the dead counted, Valerian stood among the ashes of his oldest friendship and wept without shame. Alara held him while Lily slept curled against his chest, small hand fisted in his torn shirt. At dawn he summoned the survivors to the great hall. He laid the obsidian crown on the floor and shattered it with one blow. I am no longer your king, he declared. I am a father, a husband, a man who will spend whatever centuries remain ensuring my daughter grows up in a world that no longer needs monsters. He established the Triad Council, one vampire, one Leakin, one human elected every decade. Tauren Grimfong, scarred but humbled by the night's carnage, accepted the Leakin seat on the condition that Lily be recognized as the bridge and protected by all. Peace, fragile as spring ice, settled over the land. The final blood moon rose on Lily's 9th birthday, rose so huge it seemed to press the stars out of the sky. It was the color of old wine held to candlelight, vast, bruised, ancient, and hungry. The valley before Raven's Crag lay under a hush so complete that every breath, every heartbeat, every falling flake of snow sounded like a drum in the silence. 2 armies faced each other across a mile of untouched snow. On the northern ridge the last traditionalists led by Brynja Ironclaw 6,000 Lycans who still believed purity of blood was worth dying for. On the southern ridge Valerian's alliance, vampires who had tasted daylight, Lycan defectors, the Glassmere witches, and the human militia of Ravensford, who had marched out with farming scythes and kitchen knives because children should not have to choose sides. Between them stood one small girl. Lily Whitlock Vesper, 9 years old today, walked the center line alone. She wore the dress that had taken 3 months and 3 peoples to make. Midnight silk from Valerian's coronation cloak, the one he had worn the night he became king. Silver wolf pelt from the winter coat Torin Grimfong had worn the night he almost killed Valerian, and dawn gold linen dyed by Alara's own hands while humming lullabies. The hem brushed the snow and left no print, as though the earth itself was afraid to mark her passing. In her hands she carried the reforged circlet. The obsidian crown that had once symbolized eternal night had been melted in witch fire, folded 1,000 times with silver from Lycan blades and gold from vampire goblets, and cooled in water drawn from the sacred spring at Glassmere. It was no longer black, it shimmered like captured starlight. From the southern gatehouse Valerian and Alara watched, fingers laced so tightly their wedding rings cut half-moons into skin. Torin stood beside them, no longer enemy but sworn shield, his scars glowing faintly under the moon's regard. Rowan, their second child, only 2 years old, slept on Torin's broad shoulder, thumb in mouth, trusting the former terror of the north with his dreams. "She's so small," Alara whispered, voice cracking on every word. Valerian's answer was raw. "She has always been the largest thing in any room she ever entered." Brynja Ironclaw stepped forward from the northern line. She was enormous even in woman form, 7 feet tall, white fur braided with iron rings, eyes the pale gold of winter suns. "Bridge," she called, voice rolling like avalanche. "The time of choosing is here. Moon or night? One side falls tonight. Speak." Every creature on the field leaned forward. Snow held its breath. Lily looked left at the Lycans who wanted to own her. She looked right at the vampires who had once wanted to crown her. Then she looked back at the fortress, straight at her parents, and smiled the same fearless, crooked smile that had shattered a king on a park bench 3 years earlier. She raised the circlet high above her head with both hands. "I choose love," she said, clear, sweet, absolute. Light answered. It did not come gently. It detonated outward from her small body like the birth of a star, white gold, searing, painful, purifying. The snow flash-boiled into mist. Every vampire on the field screamed as centuries of blood curse unraveled in their veins. Fangs retracted, sunlight allergy burned away like morning fog. Lycans fell to their knees as the moon's compulsory rage was ripped from their blood, leaving only the joyous freedom to shift or not shift as they chose. Witches clutched at their hearts as bindings older than language dissolved. Valerian felt it like lightning through bone. The ancient hunger that had defined him for 6 centuries simply stopped. He could taste sunlight on his tongue. He could feel his own heartbeat, steady, mortal, alive. Alara's hand flew to her mouth. Tears froze on her lashes, and then melted in the sudden warmth rolling off their daughter. When the light finally dimmed, the valley was silent again, but it was a different silence, an astonished, holy hush. The snow was untouched, pure, gleaming. The moon above had turned ordinary silver, beautiful and harmless. Lily stood in the center untouched, circlet now resting on her brow like it had grown there. Her eyes were the same hazel they had always been, but now they held galaxies. Brynja was the first to move. The 7-foot alpha walked forward, dropped her iron rings into the snow one by one, and knelt. Then Torin knelt. Then every soldier by soldier, vampire and Lycan and human, until the entire valley was on its knees before a 9-year-old girl who had just ended a war older than nations. Lily looked back at her parents and crooked a finger. Valerian and Alara ran. They met her in the middle of the field and fell to their knees too, crushing her between them, laughing, sobbing whole. Rowan woke and reached chubby arms toward his sister, crowing with delight at the pretty lights still dancing in the air. Torin approached slowly, reverently. When he reached them, he dropped to one knee again. "Little Bridge," he rumbled, voice thick with awe, "command me." Lily considered him solemnly, then reached out and placed her small hand on the worst of his scars, the one Valerian had given him the night of the siege. "Be happy," she said. "That's the only command I'll ever give anyone again." Torin Grimfong, breaker of armies, terror of the north, wept openly into the snow. That night Raven's crag blazed with light that had nothing to do with blood or war. Bonfires were lit to burn every weapon on the field. Vampires danced barefoot with Lycans under 1,000 years their enemies. Humans joined hands in circles that had no beginning and no end. Children ran between legs shouting that the moon was pretty now, not scary. In the great hall the feast tables groaned. Someone found the old park bench and carried it inside on their shoulders like a throne. They set it at the place of honor before the hearth. Valerian and Alara were lifted onto it amid cheers. Lily climbed into their laps, Rowan on Valerian's shoulder, and the entire hall sang the lullaby Alara used to sing when Lily had nightmares, only now it was a victory hymn. At midnight Valerian stood on the table and spoke the words that ended an era. "I was king of night for 600 years, he said, voice carrying without effort. "Tonight I am only a father. The throne is ash. The crown is light. Let every child born from this night forward never know the taste of inherited hate." He sat again. Alara kissed him in front of everyone. Lily rolled her eyes in the way only 9-year-olds can master and announced, "Gross but allowed." Laughter shook the rafters. Outside, the moon looked down, ordinary and kind, and for the first time in recorded history, no creature on earth felt its pull as anything but beauty. 25 years after the night of 3 blood moons. The bench still stands. It has been moved only once more, this time to the exact center of the new city that grew where the battlefield once lay. They call the city Aurora's Rest because dawn and dusk meet there now without fear. The bench sits beneath a living arch of black roses and white lilies that bloom in perfect harmony, day and night, summer and winter. A bronze plaque, now green with age, reads, "Here a lonely king was offered a mother's warmth." And learn the meaning of forever. On the 25th anniversary, the entire valley gathers. Valerian and Alara walk hand in hand through streets paved with the melted swords of old enemies. Valerian's hair is still white, but now threaded with silver from laughter, not sorrow. Alara's auburn has gone autumn red with only a few distinguished strands of frost. She wears it loose the way he loves. Rowan, 27 and captain of the bridge guard, walks ahead with his wife and their 3 red-haired hellions. Lily, 34 and first counselor of Aurora's Rest, walks beside Torin's eldest daughter Freya, now her wife, their adopted Leakin twins racing circles around them shouting, "Aunt Lily, watch me shift." The world has become something no prophecy foresaw. Vampires teach history in sunlit classrooms. Lycans farm the northern plains and sell honey that tastes of moonlight. Humans, witches, and every shade between live in houses with doors that never need locks. There is a university where the only entrance requirement is kindness. There is a hospital where healers use both blood and moonlight. There is a park where children of every kind play tag, and no one ever asks, "Which side are you on?" Valerian and Alara reach the bench first. He helps her sit the way he has every year since the beginning, careful, reverent, as though she is still the miracle who walked out of the snow carrying cinnamon and hope. She leans against him, head on his shoulder, and watches their grandchildren chase fireflies that are actually tiny witchlights cast by great-grandchildren of Morwen's line. Lily and Freya arrive next, hand in hand. Lily carries the eternal black rose, still blooming after all these years, its thorns long since fallen away. She kneels and places it gently in Alara's lap. "Tradition," she says, grinning. Rowan appears with a small wooden box. Inside are 2 rings, simple silver bands worn soft by decades of love. The inscription inside is still legible. Borrowed and kept forever. Torin limps up last, old now even for a Leakin, leaning on a cane carved from the first tree planted after the peace. His scars have turned silver. He carries a bottle of honey wine older than some nations. The crowd gathers in a loose circle, thousands strong, quiet out of respect, not command. Valerian stands. 25 years ago, he begins, voice steady but thick. A lonely man sat on this bench and believed he would never be warm again. A child offered to lend him her mother. And the universe, being wiser than all of us, accepted the loan and turned it into forever. Laughter ripples, soft, fond. He turns to Alara. "I have loved you in every language I know, and invented a few more along the way. I have watched you grow silver and more beautiful with every sunrise. I have watched our children end wars with kindness. I have learned that immortality without you would have been the cruelest curse of all." He drops to one knee, old knees creaking theatrically, and the crowd laughs again. "Alara Whitlock Vesper, will you marry me for the 26th time?" She pretends to consider, tapping her chin. "Only if you promise to keep crying first at the vows." "Done." They speak the old words again, the ones spoken under blood moons and ordinary moons and every moon between. Lily officiates once more, voice rich with joy. When they kiss, the entire valley cheers so loudly the stars seem to shake. Later, when the fires burn low and the children finally sleep curled in heaps of happy exhaustion, Valerian and Alara return to the bench alone. Snow begins to fall, soft, celebratory, the same snow that witnessed the beginning. He pulls her into his lap exactly as he did that first night in the Lantern Cafe when she was still a stranger offering sugar as medicine. "Do you ever regret it?" he asks, same question every year. She gives the same answer, threading her fingers through his. "I gave up nothing. I gained galaxies." From the shadows Lily watches, 34 and radiant, then turns to Freya with a grin. "Think we should tell them the great-grandchildren are planning a 50th vow renewal?" Freya laughs. "Let them be surprised. Some things are more fun when you don't see them coming." Above them the moon is ordinary silver, beautiful, harmless, and kind. Below them the bench holds two people who began as alone and became forever. And somewhere in the snow, a child's voice sings the lullaby that became a victory hymn, and the night answers with laughter. The eternal black rose rests in Alara's lap, thorns long gone, blooming only love. And high above the stars wink as if to say, some stories are worth waiting 6 centuries for a happy ending. The end truly beautifully forever.